You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be around the globe, in the chat room, wherever you are. This is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera, and this broadcast is coming at you live from the East Coast of the United States, the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina, and I do want to welcome you all. Tonight, we have David Griffin joining us, and we're going to have some interesting ET discussion with or without Ann tonight, and we do wish her the best, and we will get her rescheduled. David Griffin is our guest, and I gotta say, he contacted me might have been a couple weeks ago, and I've been booked up, and we had a cancellation tonight, so I had a spot to bring him in, and so I'm doing that tonight. And he says most people are aware by now that almost all of the existing national government, military, and intelligence organizations, academic and religious institutions, and global media networks and outlets have all been cooperating with and taking part in a massive cover-up of the truth regarding the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations, and the questions asked, and what is the truth? So, David, I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands, and I thank you for coming on in such short notice. And I'd like to start out possibly with you giving some background, because I know your bio even goes deeper than that. I just didn't have it handy, and I'm sorry.
No problem. All right, Michael, well, thank you. When I was growing up, this is something probably most people are familiar with, most people that listen to your show anyway. I never seemed to quite fit in. I always felt like something's not right here, and I don't feel like I quite fit in here. I don't know what it is, but something's not right. I can't put my finger on it, et cetera, et cetera. So from a very early age, I began studying lots of different things and doing, lots of reading and so forth. And eventually, I guess it was probably around the end of 1984 or so, I began seriously studying the mind and the spirit and past lives and that sort of thing. And it was about 7 years later when my first memory from a previous lifetime suddenly popped into view. It was something from last lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so that was in 92. And then since that time, or I should say that after that point, I began getting little bits and snippets from various lifetimes. And what kind of surprised me was that a lot of these did not occur here on Earth. They were, I guess you might call it space opera in a sense, in that, there was spaceships involved and life on other planets, and quite a few of my lifetimes, I was sort of involved in military operations of one sort or another, intelligence and military, but remembered quite a few different military types of lifetimes. But it was just these little bits and pieces here and there scattered around. So I continued progressing, continued my studies, and continued uncovering bits and pieces here and there, and then eventually began recovering memories of something that was not too terribly long ago. It was if I go back about 500, 600 years, I was living on a different planet.
Really?
And then eventually ended up coming here to Earth. I transferred here. Originally I was in their military service, and then I went into their intelligence service. And after some training and some ops and so forth there, I wasn't really too happy, and I transferred here to Earth. And so I was actually here on Earth, and there are people, exactly the same type of bodies that we have here. Very slight variations because this other planet has a heavier gravity. So, if you grew up on that other planet and come here, you're sort of like a Superman in a sense,
Right.
just because your body is used to a heavier gravity. But you can't really tell the difference in terms of physical appearance. Same basic type of body.
I see.
So there's a lot of personnel that have been for thousands of years, posted here and stationed here with Earth identities, and I was one of those for a period of time. So back around 2003, I guess, I began recovering a lot of memories from that specific lifetime and that particular time period. And then moving forward, I guess, to about 2010, right at the beginning of 2010, that's when I suddenly completely shifted gears. I had been working on an engineering project. Most of my background this lifetime has been sort of engineering, manufacturing, that sort of stuff. And right at the end of 2009, I'm talking December 31st, it was like, boom, that's it. All of a sudden, I felt like I got to completely shift gears. And I had started writing this book back in 2001, and I said, it's time to get that finished. And everything that I had written before that, I had spent several years writing this book, and at that point, all of it got completely rewritten from scratch in about a period of 4 months, I guess, something like that. And then as I was working on the writing, a lot of other memories began surfacing, because it turns out that this was, it was time for me to activate and proceed with my real mission. And so it was rather interesting time period right around there, because I recalled that, okay, I'm supposed to be here right now. I'm supposed to be doing this. This was a part of a mission that I accepted a very, very long time ago.
Okay,
and
before you go any further, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
So when did you first realize that this was all, when did it first all come to you? Did you have a regression or something along those lines, or was it just memories that started coming back?
I was doing things on my own. I was doing a lot of studying, and I was doing certain, I guess you might call them exercises, but this has been a very, very slow, gradual process. It's not like flipping on a light switch and, all of a sudden the trumpets blare and you've got total recall. It's nothing like that at all. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and it's a very slow, gradual process. So, it's just been over a period of, past 20 years, I guess. But particularly since 2010, that's when things really began accelerating, because that was a key point in the game, you might say.
I see. Okay. So, I guess if something like that came back to me, I guess I'd want to investigate it. So have you, I imagine you've done a lot of investigating on this, haven't you?
Investigation on what?
On your past, like trying to pick up as many of the pieces as you can. Past lives?
In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. Well, let me give you an example. Last lifetime, I was here, and I was in the U.S. military. Originally, I started as a pilot, and then very quickly went into intelligence, and actually went into a very secret group that was called the Psychor, PSY. And it was for people that had, back then it was termed psychic abilities, because they found out that I had perceptions that, went beyond the normal senses of the body. And of course, anybody that exhibits anything like that, they're very quickly grabbed and recruited into some of these secret organizations. So, of course, I was. And turns out now that was all part of the plan. But anyway, because of some of the things that I was involved in, I'm sure that my record was sanitized. So, and there's a bit more that I could say about that at a later point. But for the most part, it hasn't really been, for me personally, it hasn't been about, finding proof. Because once you begin recovering your own memories, it's quite different than if you're looking from the outside. If you're looking from the outside and you're hearing somebody like me talk about these sorts of things, you say, okay, well, I'd like to see some proof, and I understand that viewpoint.
Well, for me, I mean, with something like this is your experience and your, so, I mean, proof would be nice, sure, but just you believing what you're telling me makes it, then, okay, I'm good with that. I mean,
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I don't really believe it per se. There's an article I have on my website. It's I think it's Past Life Memories 1. It's in one of the early sections, section 2, which is all about the spiritual nature of man. But in that specific article, I talk about belief versus knowing. Like, for example, did you have a cup of coffee for, this morning?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How do you know?
Because I have another one right next to me.
My point is, do you believe it or do you know it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I know it.
Yeah, exactly. You remember, right?
Right, exactly. So,
yeah.
Okay, that's a good analogy. It's
the same thing. Once you recover a memory of your own, there's no belief at all about it. It's like, I remember. It's quite I'll tell you, it's quite a startling experience when my first memory from last lifetime suddenly surfaced, back in '92. I'll tell you, it was quite a startling experience. Of course, now I've gotten used to it, but I still remember that sort of shock when it suddenly surfaced. It was like, wow, all of a sudden everything is completely destabilized. All of my stable reference points have now been sort of thrown out the window, and it's like, no, I remember that. I remember being there. I remember doing that. So once you've had an experience like that for yourself, the whole belief issue sort of goes by the wayside, and it's like, no, I know, because I remember.
Yeah, that would make sense. And I've had so many people who I've spoke with, been on the show and even off the air, who have talked about their past lives. And I had one woman who claims that she could go into the acoustic records.
Oh, Akashic Records,
Akashic Records. And that, and she says that I was an old soul and, led some kind, not a military, but something along those lines here on Earth. But I'm thinking, if you're not on Earth and you decided to move here, somebody didn't give you the full pamphlet.
Well, it's funny. As I've been recovering my memories, it turns out I've been on and off Earth for quite a while. It seems I would live someplace else for a while, and I'd come here and do a mission or something, and I'd go back. And so I've been sort of coming and going from here for quite a while now. And it wouldn't surprise me if others have as well.
I see. Well, I'm one who believes that if we went back and were told the truth of our history, I think
Hmm.
we'd find out that ET has had a lot of involvement
Oh,
uh,
yes.
here on this planet.
Sure, and I was part of that, some of that too.
Well, good. Well, you know what? I'm gonna let you. You were telling me, and then I interrupted you, and I'm gonna let you tell me all about it. And if I have a question, I'll pop in with a question.
Okay, so where did we leave off then?
Well, you were talking about how you had come, you were once on another planet, and that I guess you were making your transition to Earth.
Yeah, I wasn't really too happy. I went in their intelligence service and of course got trained in all, black operations and that sort of thing. And I wasn't really particularly happy doing that, being involved in those types of operations. And I seem to recall requesting a transfer. And so I got transferred here. Eventually, though, I got in trouble with the service again because I had different objectives than they did. One of the things the main thing I got in trouble for, I was picked up back in 1768 is when I was finally removed. But I was teaching, at that time I was living in France, and I was teaching people about past lives. And I was actually involved with, at that time it was sort of an underground movement of people that were interested in spiritual knowledge and that sort of thing. So I was sort of involved in this groups, which actually it's sort of later became the Masons, as a matter of fact. But all of that entire thing was infiltrated and completely corrupted into, of course, what it has become today. But back then, before I was removed, there was still a lot of really good people that were there trying to preserve important spiritual knowledge and pass it along. But
See, now I have half the people tell me, well, my uncle's a Mason and my sister's a Mason or brother or whatever. And, and they say, well, they're not bad. And then I get the other half that says, oh, yes, they are. And I think that when you get to the higher levels, that's where you find the evil. I think some of the lower ones, I don't, it's kind of like need to know basis. Like the president of the United States, he might only be in for 4 years or 8 years, so they're not going to tell him everything, probably, right?
No, it's just like any other organization. You'll find a lot of really good people in there. It's very well-meaning, very genuine people, but they serve as a screen to hide the other ones, and they don't know they are. They're being used for that purpose. It's already a secret society, but there's another more secretive network hidden within. But basically, counterintelligence, they do it's the same basic game plan. They always infiltrate any organization from the top, take it over from the top, and then they can control everybody. But within the organization, you'll always find good people that are well-meaning and are not themselves evil.
Exactly. Like in the beginning of the show, I was talking about a police officer who went beyond the call of duty. He got a call to a house. The boy wanted to run away. Long story short, this cop went and bought this kid a bedroom furniture, a new video game system, and because he was, he didn't have anything. And rather than, there's other cops who would say, we're taking a kid out of the home, let's call CPS, that kind of thing, And this cop didn't do that, and so, there's good and bad in everything, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even ETs. Yep. I have some tell me they're horrible. A colleague of mine says they threaten to kill him. And me, I think there's good and bad in all. There might be some bad ones, there might be some good ones, but I don't think you can label them all. That'd be like saying, oh, well, all humans are horrible. Well, we're not all horrible.
Yep. Some are, some aren't.
Yeah, well, a lot are, and yeah.
Yeah, okay. But there's a lot of really, really good people out there too. When I was younger, I had a chance to do a bit of traveling around, and it's interesting. No matter what city or state or even country you go to, you'll find good people, wonderful people, no matter where you go. So you can't just label one group or one country or one planet as entirely evil. There's a mixture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, so let's get back into your story here. So you discover that you've had past lives and off-planet past lives at that.
Yeah.
What do you know about where you were and who you were around and technologies or anything like that, or anything you could tell us? We're always digging.
Yeah. In some particular lifetimes, I've spent more recovering data because there was some specific data that I needed to recover. It was some significant point on the track. There was some significant occurrence that occurred there, and I needed to recover more information for my. Basically, it's an intelligence report. That's essentially what you'll find on my site and in my book, and that's why it's called a briefing for the people of Earth. It's essentially an intelligence debrief on the overall view of what's been going on, not only here on Earth, but on the levels, going up above Earth. There's one particular web page on my site. It's called Levels of the Game, and that one will give you a real quick overview of how high up the levels go, and what that particular page traces back my personal involvement in some of the various levels as I've been coming down to this level where we are now, the sort of planetary level. But up above, just above the planetary level, you have a sector level, which is, just this little sector of the galaxy. And then up above that, you'll have a galactic level and a galactic level organization. And I was involved in that a while back. And then up above that, you'll get up to sort of a universal level, which is, controlling everything in this universe. And at that point, it probably starts getting outside of most people's reality level, when you start getting outside of the universal level. But I'll just throw this out there just for the heck of it, is I remember coming into this universe. I remember when I first came in here, which is about 12.8 billion years ago. So I've been on this mission for quite a while. Now, we are, that may sound fantastic to some people, but we are, all of us, immortal spiritual beings living in a physical body. And when you look at it from that viewpoint, well, how long does an immortal spiritual being live? I'm asking you.
Well, anywhere from 70 to 100 years, depending on how well you've taken care of yourself.
No. An immortal spiritual.
Oh, a spiritual. Well, forever, because energy can never be
there you go.
Destroyed, right?
Okay. So how far back is the beginning of forever?
Oh, God, it never ends.
Goes back quite a ways, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Yeah. So that's what we're sort of approaching here is where did we come from? Where did, and I'll tell you, I'm nowhere near the beginning, not even, but I will tell you that how far back I remember, it's well outside of most people's reality, and I probably will sidestep that one. Just because it would be such a huge gap. But anyway, I do recall coming into this particular universe, and this one actually, this may sound funny, but this one isn't very old at all. It's actually fairly new.
Yeah, well, this is new to me too, because I've covered past lives. I've covered people who claim to be from other planets and people who have claimed to have contact with people from other planets, but I've never had somebody, I don't think I have anyways, had somebody who had a past life in another planet and in another galaxy even. So this is a first for me, and so I'm interested.
Well, as being a spiritual being, when you're not in a body, you're not stuck to any one planet, unless I guess by your own considerations and various other mechanisms. But for me, of course, I've been on and off this planet for quite a while now. Like I say, I've come and done missions here. I was here actually millions of years ago. I was here on on an investigation.
See, and I have a colleague, again, I bring him up because he talks about these kinds of things, and Peter Kling, who says that in a meditative state, leaving your body, you can go anywhere you want. Now, I've had out-of-body experiences, but I never, left the planet. But then, my business was on planet, I guess. But so I believe it is possible, and boy, it'd be great if we could get control of something like that. And because I'd like to go up to Mars and check it out and see what's really going on there.
I would advise caution there. There has been up there for quite a while. There's an underground facility up there. That's the main Between Lives facility, and it has been heavily shielded with energy shield. But that is, I don't know if you got to that point on my website yet, but I get into that particular, does any of that sound familiar to you?
No, I'll be honest. I scaled through the website somewhat briefly, and I got a pretty good gist of where we might be going tonight. And so, but I'm all on board.
Okay. Well, let me just give you a little background on this. Are you familiar with the word samsara, which is the repeating wheel of life?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept of the wheel of life, of birth, death, rebirth, etc.?
Yeah, like a reincarnation kind of thing?
Yeah. Like you'll find that in Buddhism, for example. It's called samsara. In English, it's the wheel of life. And basically, it's sort of like being on a hamster wheel, in a sense. And, well, I don't know an easy way to broach this other than to just come right out and say it. So I guess I'll just come right out and say it. Earth is, and has been for a very, very long time now, a prison planet.
You'll get no argument here.
Okay, and it's a part of a spiritual prison system. So, this is sort of like Supermax. When you die, people have been pre-programmed to report back into one of these facilities where they get their memories wiped, and then they get some programming for their next lifetime, and then they get shot back down and pick up a new body and start a new lifetime completely oblivious of what's gone on before.
I see.
That's been going on here for a very, very long time, and that's basically why most people don't remember their previous lifetimes. It's been getting this mind wipe lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and this stuff just builds up like layers.
I see.
So what I've been doing, why I'm at where am now is because I have been systematically discharging and getting rid of these layers of charge which are built up on top of the memories. Because the memories don't actually get wiped, they don't actually get deleted. All that happens is there's just a great big cap of energy, in a sense, that's put on top of it so that you can't see them, you can't get near them. Mm-hmm. But if you begin discharging these built-up layers of energy, then the memories just start rising back to the surface as a natural result.
Okay, well, let's hold it right there, and then we'll come right back and pick up where we left off. We've got to take a break. Folks, this is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera. My guest, David Griffin, and we have his website linked up on the homepage of latenightinthemidlands.com, so go check it out, and we'll take questions after a little bit. Let us talk a little bit, and if you got a question or a comment, 803-317-2264. We'll be right back. All right, David.
Yes.
So, let's pick right back up on this.
Okay.
Energy can't be destroyed. Now, you did mention levels, and I've got to ask you about that. So,
Okay.
On I guess what level are we? Are we the last level?
Well, I suppose that depends on you. Well, for example, right now, my body, just like yours, is down here on the planetary level, stuck here to a certain degree here in this culture. Again, I guess that really depends on the person, because now you're starting to get into where is a person at mentally and spiritually.
Well,
because
I mean
Yep.
more of humanity as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Earth, as a general rule, is down at the planetary level.
Okay.
Right? So at the planetary level, of course, you've got what I'm talking about now is sort of a hierarchical structure of control. And essentially, what this let me back up. There's basically what we're looking at here is two opposing groups. If I can just overly simplify this whole thing, you've got on the one side you've got the enslavers, and then on the other side you've got everybody else. So the basic purpose of the enslavers is to dominate, suppress, and enslave everyone. That's their basic motivation. That's their driving force. That's their end goal. And then there's all the rest of us who aren't motivated by enslaving others, who are more interested in freedom. So there's sort of this game going on between enslavers versus free beings. And so I happen to be on the free beings team, and I'm assuming you are too.
I hope so.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption. And so I've been a part of this this team for a very, very long time, long before this universe came into being. And one of my main functions has been as an intelligence officer. So I do lots of investigations, and one of the ways that I've done that has been to be in certain places at certain times in order to acquire certain information. And, like, for example, last lifetime is a good example of that. That, because of the way my last lifetime played out, I was able to be at Roswell during that whole thing and acquire certain information on what actually went on there and so forth. Now, I should also point out here that all of this, there's this big, horrendous game plan that the enslavers came up with, and which they're following. And so I've sort of used that to a certain degree to pre-position myself in certain places and acquire certain information. So that's been sort of my gig, I guess you might say, for a very long time, sort of following the command chain down from the higher levels on down and being in certain places at certain times. Mm-hmm. So I could arrive here at this particular point because this is actually a very, the place we are right now is a very critical juncture in the game.
It is very critical where we are now. And, there's so much that I want to ask you. I guess I'll start here. Now, do you think that we're supposed to know about our past lives? Because, I think about this. What if I could remember, like, my last two lives, say, and I had unfinished business? If I remember my past lives, then I would also remember things that, affected me in those lives. So I would imagine they'd affect, would I want to go run back and find my 102-year-old girlfriend or,
Well, it's interesting. Once you go back and you actually start uncovering these things, there's a lot of mental and emotional charge that is locked up back there in the past until you do remember. But it's kind of funny is once you actually start uncovering it and you start releasing that charge, it's like, any sort of negative emotions you might have had associated with that, they just sort of release and, just gone. And if you had a feeling of unfinished business, let's say when maybe you got killed, you were in a battle or something and you got killed and you felt, oh my God, I never got to go do this, or, I left my wife and kids behind or something like that. once you uncover it and release the charge, it's like all of those feelings sort of dissipate. It's rather interesting. It's hard to describe unless you've actually experienced it, but the sort of negative emotions, once you release all of that built up charge, that's been bottled up, it's sort of like,
Well, I guess for me, I mean, there's part of me would want to know about past lives of mine, and then there's part of me that might wish I didn't. I mean, what if I did something really horrible, and then
Sure.
I have to go back and revisit that? That would be tough.
Guess what? Welcome to the club. Yep,
So,
that's a part of, actually that is a part of the mechanism that keeps them hidden also, is because there are some things back there that, quite frankly, we don't want to look at. And that includes me too. But that is a part of the path back out again, is confronting those things and taking responsibility for them.
that's very true. But I mean, what if you like say somebody who might have murdered 5 people and he did his time in prison, he died in prison, comes back in this life, and now he's a preacher and he's helping people out or whatever it is they do, amongst other things. Hopefully not, but and they're helping people out, and then they have to go back and they see what they did in their past life. I mean, you would think something like that, you'd want to just, okay, I served my time, but I guess
I don't want to look at that.
Yeah, but I guess ultimately, if you're one who believes in God, then you might say, well, maybe God's the judge of that. Maybe you're going to serve 5 life sentences. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's been my personal experience that each of us, we are our own judge, jury, and executioner. We end up punishing ourselves.
See, and I could agree with that to an extent where, I've told people jokingly, but I really believe it, that when we do pass away, I picture us, those little booths they have set up with the computers. You fill out applications at these stores. They've got them set up. Well, I picture this little booth that we sit at, and we're watching our entire life, and, every time we cringe, somebody's behind us with a pad and making a check. It's like, so if you can't forgive yourself for what you've done, how can you expect anybody else to, right? Something like that, or?
Yeah. Well, matter of fact, there's an article that I have on my site also where I talk about this very specific thing. It's called Ethics and Justice, and that's where I get into this very specific thing. There was an incident that I recalled that was very unpleasant for me to look at, because I did something that I knew was wrong, and it was sort of coming to grips with that, having to face that and take responsibility for it. And yeah, it's difficult. It's not a pleasant thing to do. I'll readily admit that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that is the road back out. It's all of these things that we don't want to look at is what actually keeps us entrapped. In many cases, we are doing the job of the enslavers themselves, because we're keeping ourselves trapped because of these past transgressions that we don't want to look at and take responsibility for. But the fact of the matter is, okay, yeah, I did run that guy through with my sword. I did it. So all you can do is just go, well, okay, yes, I did it. And I can't undo it now, and all I can do is just be willing to face that and take responsibility for it now and go, okay, well, I won't do that again.
See, and that's, for me right now, that's kind of easy to do, because I've never done anything that would make me want to jump a bridge and hang myself. But at the same time, if I was somebody who did something really horrible, I don't know. I mean, I'm hard on myself just for simple things now. I can just imagine if I did something horrendous. And but,
well, that's the basic. All of us are basically ethical by nature, and that's why I'm saying that we end up punishing ourselves quite severely when we've done something that we feel is wrong, that we shouldn't have done. And the enslavers used that to their advantage. So the only way to undo it is to begin confronting these things on an incremental basis. It's not like you have to confront every crime you've ever committed, since the beginning of time. They do come up from time to time, even, somebody like me, but of course I've had many lifetimes as a soldier and warrior, so, I've got plenty of things sitting back there where I've killed people. Most of the time, of course, they were in battle, and that's a whole different thing, but, that is something that you have to eventually look at and confront.
If humanity was anything then like it is now, I have to assume that I must have killed somebody. I just had to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, last lifetime, I was a fighter pilot when I first got in. Beginning just before the war actually. Well, it was before the Japanese attack of Pearl Harbor, but I joined up with this group called the AVG, American Volunteer Group. But anyway, I was a fighter pilot, so. But there's been plenty of other lifetimes where I've been a warrior in battle, and
yeah.
So that's.
Well, we got a question from our Spreaker chat. One of our listeners asked whether we could come back as things like cats or dogs or whatever, as an animal.
I suppose if you wanted to, you could. I've never had the desire to.
Neither have I. See, now, so then where do these cats and dogs come from? Because at some point, somebody's got to want to, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's alive, basically, it's being animated by a spiritual being. So, and the being can be highly intelligent. I'm sure you've run across some animals that you go, man, that's not a regular.
I had a dog who, I know everybody's got one of these stories, it seems, but I had a dog who thought he was one of my kids, and I actually treated him like he was one of my kids. He was just, the dog, he had everything. Personality. I swear he even laughed sometimes.
Yeah. So that's just a being who, and probably from what you're describing there, this was a more intelligent being, but just decided that, hey, it might be fun to live a life as a dog. And I've heard of people doing that before, of, being a horse or a dog or a tiger or something like that.
He wouldn't say that if he had lived a past life in China.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But of course, there are some beings that are more awake than others. But any animal, there is a spiritual being there animating the body, just like us. They may not be as awake, may not be as high on the scale as we are, spiritually, but there's still a being there, a living spiritual being that's animating that body.
I wonder sometimes if they're not higher spiritual energies, just because the fact that they come back, they choose to come back, and they don't need speech, and they don't need any of that, and just loving, carefree.
Well, in some cases you could be correct. You could be. This is unfortunately at this time, this is a rather degraded civilization, and this isn't the first degraded civilization I've lived in.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that, what your thoughts were, or even your experiences maybe, as to, how far back life might actually have existed on this planet, and how many times there was, I don't believe that thousands of years ago people were using stone tools. I think it went beyond that. Maybe slaves were forced to use them or something along those lines, but I think that we had tremendous technologies, and I think that these technologies are now being reinvented. So
Correct.
Yeah, well, what's your thoughts on that? How far back do you think things go? What do you think got all this going? Why are we here now?
Well,
Big
now
question.
You've got to get into some of the stuff that's contained in my book, which is looking at a much, much larger view that goes beyond this universe. Boy. Yeah, this is all part of a big game, essentially. So is this universe. And
So
what we're
it's
doing
like
here right now.
somebody's program on their computer?
Well, not computer per se. Program is not far from it. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'd have to get into that's better approached on a gradient, and it might be better for some of these things to sort of broach this after, let's say, for example, at some point, maybe after you've read the data in my book and the data has gotten out there a bit more widely to where a lot of other people are familiar with what's in there too, then we could start getting into, that whole game aspect, the real big game. But anyway, to get back to your earlier question, yes, there's been advanced technology on this planet for a very, very long time. And, periodically it gets wiped out and everybody has to start all over again. The last destruction was about 13,000 years ago. That's when, Atlantis went down, and that was the Great Flood and the Younger Dryas event and extinction event in North America. All of that stuff sort of occurred simultaneously, and then there was a major disruption on the planet, and then everybody had to rebuild again after that. But there was a high level of technology before that, and there was after that too.
So somewhere in the cosmos, then I picture some kid who just can't get by that top level. He's got the paddle in his hand, and he's playing the game, and for some reason he just can't get past that level. We keep resetting.
Well, yeah, and actually that's not by coincidence either. It's going back to that samsara, the repeating wheel of life and the hamster wheel. Mm-hmm. Well, picture that hamster wheel on a much, much larger scale now.
I see. I throw this what if around sometimes, and you know how now they've actually have it where people can pay to live on forever in a virtual world where people froze their bodies. Well, now they're like downloading their brains, downloading everything there is about them, and they're going to be able to put this into a program. So you might go through eternity in some mall walking around shopping, and you have no idea that you're a part of that program. And I sometimes wonder if, what if right now we're part of somebody's program and we just have no idea because we were programmed not to know.
Yep. Okay, well, yes and no. The last part of what you're talking about of being part of a program and not realizing, yeah, that's true. The earlier part where they're talking about, downloading a person's memories and freezing the body, well, to put it bluntly, that's a bunch of crap. And I'll tell you why, because memories are not stored in the brain. If they were, it would not be possible to have any past life memories. Your memories are stored in your mind, but the mind is not the brain. The mind is something entirely different, and the mind is actually energetic in nature. It's made up of energies and masses, and you take that with you whenever you go, wherever you go.
That makes sense, sure, but I guess more I guess they did use the word memory and and try to duplicate that person virtually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
it won't work. As a matter of fact, where they sometimes in a movie you'll see where they create a clone and the clone is identical. Well, yes and no. The clone is simply a duplicate body, but the being inhabiting that body may be entirely different.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like twins.
Could be, yeah, exactly like twins. Even though the bodies look identical, the being inhabiting those two bodies are completely two entirely different beings who may have had entirely different past tracks, and therefore they have different content stored in their minds, different traumatic incidents in their past, different likes and dislikes, etc. So that's why this whole concept of clone thing is, they're still stuck on this idea that the person is the brain, and that's not the case. The brain is just the control center for the body, and it's sort of an user interface point. But it's, you are the driver that gets inside of the car. And you can change cars, but the driver is still the same.
Right. And, I've always thought that if the soul had to reside somewhere in the body, I would think it would be the heart, because you hear about people who go brain dead, but yet they stay alive because their heart's beating. But once the heart stops, it's all over.
Well, actually, that's something else. That's we have to get into a whole nother area, which all right, you're familiar with the basic concept of being possessed by spirits and that sort of thing, right?
Oh yeah,
sure.
I've had people on who have told some pretty horrifying stories.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this phenomenon has been around for thousands and thousands of years. People have known for a very, very long time now that another being can sort of come into their space and be sharing the same space as them. And that's very true. And this is an actual fact. It's actually quite common. As a matter of fact, it's quite uncommon to find someone who does not have a number of other beings in their space. But in most cases, they're sort of submerged. They're what you would call the person would be the dominant being, and then these other beings would be sort of submerged. In some cases, they're sort of unconscious. In other cases, they're locked into some past traumatic incident and continually replaying it, and all sorts of different things. I've got a whole chapter in my book that deals with that particular topic.
Okay.
But there is one specific being whose job it is to run the body, and that one you could call that I guess you could call that a genetic entity, for lack of a better term. And that being is the one that keeps the body alive. So when you see somebody that's in a coma, well, the being that you knew as the person, that being's gone. They took off. They're out on the other side of Arcturus or something. But the genetic entity is still there, keeping the body alive. And that's what, when you see somebody in a coma, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a genetic entity keeping the body alive. But the person's long gone.
Yeah, and I would think that, because I don't know how many times I've been in a hospital and I've watched, growing up watching certain family members who have passed away, and you just see a shell laying there. It's like they're not in there. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the person that you knew is not in that body anymore. They're gone.
Yeah, I could certainly buy that. I believe it. It's, it's the energy leaves and something keeps that body. Sometimes it's machines that keep the body going.
Yeah, it's actually a live spiritual being. I mean, that's the source of life is a living spiritual being. That is what animates the body. That's what keeps it alive, et cetera, et cetera. Now, once the genetic entity departs, that's it. The body's dead.
Okay.
Then it's just a dead piece of meat that begins to decompose. But now, for example, in my case, at the beginning of this lifetime, I recall picking up this body about 9 days before I was born. So I was off getting my programming for this life, and then I came in, and I recall seeing the roof of the hospital as I was sort of descending down, and then swooped on through the walls, and there's my mother in a examination chair with a big pregnant belly, and I just kind of swooped right on inside. But see, the genetic entity was already there in place, building this new body. And so I came in, just before the actual birth, and sort of came in and said, "Okay, boss is in town. I'm taking over now." And so, here I am.
So if we live different lives on different planets, I'm assuming if you did, then we probably all do at some point. If if that's the case, then why such the big secret of the UFOs and all that? You think that if they're that far advanced, they probably already know this, and
Yes, they
so
do.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, there's a great big secret. That's basically what my website is basically exposing, is why all of this is still being kept secret. People know that there's UFOs all over the place. They know there's extraterrestrial cultures, and yet there's still this massive cover-up going on. Well, why is that? Well, it's because there's a much, much bigger secret that they're trying to keep. And that much bigger secret is that Earth is a prison planet. This system, our system here, is sort of located out on the outskirts of the galaxy. So, people tend to take their trash out to the edge of the city and dump it there. Well, Earth has been sort of a spiritual dumping ground for a long time. When people wanted to get rid of certain individuals, let's say, people like me that are troublemakers, I always end up uncovering the truth and exposing it. So I'm a big troublemaker to people who want to keep secrets.
Me too.
Anybody else, let's say political prisoners, people that aren't willing to go along with unethical things, people that speak out, people that don't conform, people that are very brilliant thinkers. You'll get quite an interesting mix of people that have been dumped here because, let's say, quote unquote rulers on other planets felt threatened by them. So what they do is they ship them off to Earth, and you get a mind wipe, and then you get stuck in this repeating wheel of life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that's the much, much bigger secret, is that, have been for a very long time considered to be prisoners. And that's why the elite are allowed to get away with all the crap that they do, because they're the prison guards.
Now, when you say prisoner, do you mean our energy, even when this body dies, that we're somehow kept on this planet?
Well, okay. Let me. When I'm talking to you, you are a spiritual being. I know in most cases people are told that you quote unquote have a soul, but have denotes possession of something, and possession means that it's something other than you, right? Well, you don't have a spirit, you are a spirit. See, the thing that you possess is a body.
I see. Yeah, very well put.
Yeah, so it's a shift, and you got to shift your viewpoint on that a bit. So when you leave your body, it's not your soul leaving, it's you leaving. The body gets left behind, and who knows, maybe even the genetic entity stays there with the body, and you might, you can consider that also. But it's basically you. I'm talking about you. You are the being that goes into bodies and goes out of bodies. So what's been going on here for a very, very long time now is they have these facilities set up, very elaborate facilities, and people have been programmed after death to go to the light, right? You've heard that.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, well, that's part of their Between Lives operation. People just go to the light, and then they report back in, and then they go through the whole procedure again, and they come out the other end totally oblivious and start a new lifetime. And typically they'll get a purpose, for their next lifetime too. As a matter of fact, now that I've begun uncovering all this, I actually recall getting some of the implanting to create this identity called David Griffin, which was kind of interesting when I began recovering that. It was quite interesting. Oh, okay, so this is who I'm supposed to be now, and this is the life that I'm supposed to live, and this is what I'm supposed to do. But of course, being the ornery sort that I am, I'm sort of bucking that and doing some things that the enslavers weren't quite counting on. I'm telling all of you about it.
Yeah. We're up for one more break, and
Okay.
and we'll come back, and we've still got about an hour to go if
Okay.
if you're up for staying. So
Sure, I'm good to go.
all right, great. So hang on with me. This is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera, and we're going to be back in a moment. My guest, he's here. If you've got a question or a comment, David Griffin.